And I've come to learn that they are limited in what they can do and what they can say because they're part of the system. If they don't toe the line, a bit like back in COVID a couple of years ago, if they don't toe the line, they get their license cancelled.
Yeah.
Right? But I've since come to the conclusion that they've got a really strange way of measuring success when treating cancer patients. So they deem success as being anyone that lives longer than 5 years, for them is successful.
Yeah, that's all in the studies.
If you die the day after, not their problem, right? But they've been successful in the treatment, right? But I've also come to the conclusion that it takes 5 years for the chemo to actually kill you. It's not the disease, but your immune system becomes so shattered by that time that you will invariably die of something else, not necessarily the thing that they're trying to treat, because you cannot cope with anything else, you know. So
yes.
But
of course, you're deemed on paper to be a success, and that's how they trick people. I mean, I have a degree in statistics, and so I read a lot of the studies as well, and it's essentially it's fraud in a way. Like, most people don't know it. Most people don't know the 5-year window, what they class as success.
Right.
And I don't know if you've heard the theory where cancer is essentially poisoning, and
Absolutely.
therefore it's
Yeah.
trying to, the tumors and all that are just trying to capture and
Yeah.
hold all that poison in, which is kind of when you get one of those biopsies and it breaks through and it kind of spreads all over the body, because and then you kind of die, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Which is kind of completely nuts.
Absolutely. And just on that note, that was one of the first things that they recommended to me also, that the urologist suggested, let's do a biopsy so we know exactly what sort of cancer it is. No, we're not doing a biopsy. We don't need to know the nature of the cancer. If it's prostate cancer, it's prostate cancer, right? So there's many ways of treating that.
Welcome back to Health Alliance Australia's podcast. My name is Jeanee Andrewartha, and I'll be your host today. Health Alliance Australia is a leading health advocacy organisation dedicated to honouring bodily autonomy and well-informed health choices. Today, our special guest is Robin Gersbeck. Robin and I met through LinkedIn. He's a highly knowledgeable finance and business development professional, principal and CEO of Dynamic Capital Group. But today, we are going to be talking about Robin's incredible health journey. After a predominantly healthy life with not so much as a runny nose, he was struck down with prostate cancer 3 years ago. By the time he discovered it, with almost no symptoms, he was at stage 4, and the experts in white coats gave him only months to live, but still insisted on chemo. He refused, he did his own research, and is now almost fully recovered. Now, this story is so important, and it's especially considering all the turbo cancer going on. And we're going to kind of link this in. I was also struck down with heart failure, cardiomyopathy in 2022. My EF was 15%, and I too am almost fully recovered. So the session today we're going to be doing will be exchanging notes, essentially, bringing ideas in here, our experiences, case studies, our own research, tying it in with some of the other Health Alliance podcasts and alternative health practitioners. Our discussion will be quite candid. We're not offering health advice here so much as our individual journeys. And what I'd like to say right now is that due to APRA and various governing bodies, your doctor and naturopath, who are under such banners, are also very limited by what they can actually tell you and the health advice they can give you. They have their own biases, their limitations, and their knowledge is very much specialized, which is both, good and bad. So Robin and I went through kind of life and death scenarios. So we actually had to get it right. And we both read quite widely, applied the knowledge that we've learnt. And so this is what we're going to do today. We're just going to share from the heart, both of us. This is not scripted. We have just met. So we're going to go and see where this goes. So welcome, Robin. Thank you so much for coming today. It's an incredible journey. I know what it's like to face, well, a dire diagnosis.
Yes, thank you. Yeah.
It's very traumatic, isn't it? Like when you are at the doctor and they're telling you you've got months to live.
Yes, look at his. Thank you, Jeannie, and great introduction. can I say in my case, and I don't know where this inner strength came from very early on in the piece, but to begin with, it was disbelief. I thought, they've obviously picked up someone else's results. That's sort of the first thing that goes through your mind, and then they're obviously not someone else's results; they're your results. But even with that, I was and I've spoken to so many people that have been struck down with various types of cancers since then. And the first thing that happens is, you're right, everyone gets struck down with this fear. And as soon as that happens, your reasoning, etc., goes out the window. I did not go through that, and I don't know what to put it down to, and I don't say it with any arrogance or any cockiness, but I just thought, you know what, I'm not going to be drawn into that story.
Yes.
And what I'd like to add to that, and I'll preface it by saying I've come across now many people in the medical profession, and it is a bloody industry, right? There's lots out there that subscribe to the system, and they're truly about making a buck. And really, at the end of the day, almost they don't give a rat's ass about you're to them. They see this every day. They become desensitized, and you're just another number. Having said that, there are some really great people in the profession as well, and I've come to learn that they are limited in what they can do and what they can say because they're part of the system. If they don't toe the line, a bit like back in COVID a couple of years ago, if they don't toe the line, they get their license cancelled, right? If they don't tick certain boxes, they get their license cancelled, and none of them want that, right?
And of course, we're just strangers to them, like we're just some person that's come along. And I think people have a very unrealistic expectation, and they'll say, oh, but they should have done this and this and this.
Yeah.
But they're just like every ordinary person. You've come along, you've got a problem, and most people are just going to take drugs and surgery. That's the option. And they're not going to come and turn around and say, oh, you need to change all of these particular things.
Yeah, no, totally. Now, the bit that I don't like is that so many of them use this fear factor to their advantage. Well, to their advantage, everything is guided by the fear factor. So they scare the living shit out of you to begin with. And then you think, oh, where do I go from here? They're the experts. And everyone just handballs the responsibility for their own health and their own well-being over to them. And that is the worst thing you can do. But to be fair, not that I'm the smartest man on the planet, but most people are so unaware of what the alternatives are. Most people are so unaware of the research and the information that's out there. So it's natural to them. Shit, they're the people that know. They're the experts. I'll hand it over to them. And I haven't done that in the 3 years.
Did you know anything beforehand? Did you know other alternatives beforehand that when you were diagnosed, or did your research come after the diagnosis?
Look, yes and no. I had a sneaking suspicion, but again, because I can't remember the last time I had the flu or a cold or anything prior to that. And look, to be fair, I have so my background is German. My mum was very much into herbal remedies for everything, right? So rather than go straight to the doctor, no, there's a tea for that, there's a this for that, there's a right.
Beautiful.
And I've sort of subscribed. I'm one of few of my generation that have actually adopted that and followed that through. And truth be known, I should have probably gone into naturopathy or something along those lines. But in a way, and it's too late now, but in a way, foolishly, I followed the money trail and thought, oh, look, I'll get into the finance business, and that's where I should be. And I've it's interesting. throughout my life, I've gone back to, oh, geez, I really need to get back into this area and maybe work out how to monetize it or something to make a living out of that.
But isn't it interesting though, life brings you back into that full circle. I myself, similar journey. And then when I ended up with cardiomyopathy, first time round was in 2011. And I
Yes,
fully recovered, went on to have a baby at 43, 11th child. It was kind of like a high
right.
risk pregnancy, had it in the wild, gave birth at home. Amazing. Anyway, the thing was, I found was that when I was diagnosed again after 10 years of being fully recovered in
Yes,
2022, I was like, yes, this is my opportunity. I'm going to, I wasn't like you, I wasn't overcome by fear. And there was that shock factor of, yeah, I think they kind of got it wrong. Of course, I had a second opinion. The pictures didn't lie because it was an ultrasound. My heart function was pretty seriously bad. But like, it's like there's something inside you, and that's the attitude. This is what I found too with women with cardiomyopathy, is that the main driver for what will a person will recover, whether that person will recover or not, is actually mindset above all else, because you have to have
yeah,
the right mindset and belief system in the first place to firstly do the research, to process all that research, and
yeah,
then not just like read so much, but actually to apply it and then see the results, modify what you're doing, and be very, critical and a little bit emotionally detached from the situation, because where they can draw you in is that emotional manipulation.
yes.
You should do this for your family. Think about your children. With you, I'm sort of interested to know, like you said that they gave you months to live. Did you have symptoms when you went in at all? Like, what made you go in the first place to get checked for cancer? And then for them to say you've got months to live, do you think your decision making might have changed if they said, I mean, of course we don't know, we can offer you chemo and it might give you an extra 3 years or something, uh, do you think that the fact that there was no hope with chemo forced your hand to go and look for alternatives, plus the fact that your mother was all into these various therapies as well?
A good question. For all the again with my background, and I've been a prolific sort of reader and student of health and well-being generally, and there was no, regardless of what the diagnosis was going to be, there's no way I was going to do chemo,
Okay.
right?
Yep.
So that was never ever going to be on the table, right? And that was again the first thing, was the first of a number of things that was suggested, recommended that I take on. That was never going to happen. Let me see. The whole thing started with I won't go into detail of what triggered it, but I went to a doctor, then got a blood test, and it showed an extraordinarily high PSA, and it was suggested from there that it's more than likely prostate cancer. So the thing from there is then to see an expert urologist, and because these guys are in such big demand, there was a significant 6-week wait period
All right.
before you could even get to see someone, so
You could die by then, right?
yeah, that's right. But and in that period, I had another blood test, and the numbers went up significantly again from there. So I knew that there was something amiss. But I then started drilling down into what alternatives and what solutions, etc. And I then started. Sorry, has that answered that question?
Yeah. So then
Yeah.
what did you do after that? Like, so you had that 6-week wait, and of
Right.
course you wouldn't have been just sitting there waiting for the appointment. You would have been actively trying to find answers
Yeah.
here.
Yeah. But what got me there again was the 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 fellow I went to see was highly recommended, a leader in his field, and you walk in, and it's like walking into a prestige used car dealership. Everything
Yes.
immaculately dressed, right? And you can see all the plaques on the wall.
All
It
there
is,
to impress you.
there is this much humility and this much humanity. I can count on one hand throughout this journey the number of professionals that have actually stopped to say, so how do you feel, Rob?
Mm.
Right? That has never come into it. And it's such a vital vital part of the whole the whole treatment paradigm, you know.
Yeah, they
It's
don't even ask you not just how you feel emotionally, but just how you're actually feeling.
yeah,
Like
exactly.
physically.
That's right. Any of those, you know, how you
It's all done on
coping.
tests. It's all like
Yeah.
they just look at the tests and they go, okay. And I
Yeah.
was actually talking to a midwife the other day, and she was saying how, like, even new midwives who are being trained, they're not asking and connecting with the woman who's having a baby. They're looking
Right.
at some chart on the computer screen and trying to measure out her
Yep.
contractions and then saying, oh, she's close. And then of course she being an older midwife's like shoving them back in and saying, no, go and talk to the woman. Find
Yeah.
out how she is, establish that connection. And it's
Yeah.
so lost, isn't it? That there's
Yeah.
no intimate connection with you as a person. You're just
No.
this object that's come into the
Yep.
office.
Yep.
You go through this process, test,
Yep.
you know, there's the
Yep.
result, there's the treatment,
Yep.
comply or get
Yep.
out of my office, you know.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
And I've heard that. I've heard people
Yeah.
who
Yeah.
were even threatened that if they tried anything natural, that
Yeah.
the oncologist would stop treating them. But obviously this wasn't like
Yeah.
you went to you got the tests and then did you go back for any other? I mean,
I,
obviously,
I went to see a couple of them, and the feeling. So there's I saw two urologists, and I saw two oncologists, right? And the feeling was the same across all four of them, right? And every time I walked out, I thought, you know what? I've just paid for another one of your bloody car payments, your Porsche payments. You know, that's sort of, but no feeling of, okay, I can actually. I've actually got something out of this. No,
yeah,
treated like another number. And look, I get the fact that they see, you know, a number of people every day with the same thing, and I would imagine there's an element of becoming a little bit desensitized. But if you're in that profession, how can you? What gets me is the extent to which they almost put up a war between you and them, and there's no humanity. You know, it's so desensitized. It beggars belief as far as I'm concerned. You know, now the other side of it is the one of the first people I went to see. Again, leading light. He's a professor. He's really up there in one of the North Shore's better, well-established hospitals. You know, again, it's I won't name the place. It's a really schmick place, and he has got a marvelous reputation, right? But I said to him what I was doing, and didn't want to know. Did not want to know. And I took my partner with me at the time, who was at that time, it's just sorry, she's still my partner, but she let me clarify that. But she's a very feisty South American, right? So she sort of sat there in the background, listened very patiently, right? And he sort of waffled on a bit, and she actually cut him off mid-sentence and said, "Right, doctor, hear all that." Said, if he continues doing what he's doing, how long do you think he's got to live? And if he takes on what you're suggesting, how long has he got to live? Right? And the only thing I respected out of the conversation is he actually turned around to me and asked for my permission to answer that question. Right?
oh, lovely.
but the rest of it, no. So he said, and that's where the thing came. Where he said, "Look, if he continues doing what he's doing, he's got a couple of months to live only.
Wow.
But if he does this, boom, boom, he might. We would have given him 5 years, but because he's come along so late in the piece, a maximum of 3 years, and it again probably shorter than that. And I thought,
Yes, and they're probably
yeah,
overestimating that anyway, you know,
yeah,
because
yeah.
there's
But
that
but
bias there, isn't there?
but I've since come to the conclusion that they've got a really strange way of measuring success when treating cancer patients. So they deem success as being anyone that lives longer than 5 years, for them is
Yeah,
successful.
that's in all in the studies.
If you
Yeah,
die the day after, not their problem, right? But they've been successful in the treatment, right? But I've also come to the conclusion that it takes 5 years for the chemo to actually kill you. It's not the disease, but your immune system becomes so shattered by that time that you will invariably die of something else, not necessarily the thing that they're trying to treat, because you cannot cope with anything else, you know. So
yes.
you know,
But of course, you're deemed on paper to be a success, and that's how they trick people. I mean, I have a degree in statistics, and so I read a lot of the studies as well. And it's just it's
right,
essentially it's fraud in a way. Like most people don't know it. Most people don't know the 5 year window, what they class as success.
right,
And when you think of 5 years, I mean, what is it? 5 seasons, 5 summers,
yeah,
and just over, you know, about around 260 weeks, right? It's not
yeah,
long.
yeah.
It's not long. And also the decline at the end, you know, watching people die towards the end, the quality of life is not there.
I was going to say, so the immediate thing that came to my mind with that statement was, you know what? Let's say it's somewhere between 18 months and 3 years. Why would I go down that path anyway? Because it's going to so compromise my quality of life. I'm going to feel like crap for most of that time. I'm going to lose my hair and whatever. Regardless of that, why would you go down that path? Yeah, no. So but I was never going to go down that path anyway. And I've got to say, I have taken on some traditional treatments. So the thing with with prostate cancer is it's 95% of them are hormone driven. So
Yep.
I have taken some hormone blocking compounds and a hormone therapy. Again, even that goes against my grain because I'm you know the side effects of that. You know you can live with them,
Yep.
but you get hot flushes. So I will never ever um, never ever even raise a smile when I hear what women go through when they go through change of life, for example. Uh, so you get that, and you end up if you're on it for a while, your body composition changes, you lose your muscle, you get man boobs, you get a tummy, all those sorts of things. So I've been a little bit fortunate in that, but I've certainly lost lots of muscle.
Mm.
And 3 years ago, I was getting up 3-4 times a morning doing 3 rounds of 30 push-ups and stuff, and I was probably the fittest that I'd ever been. And a lot of that's gone out the window. Having said that,
Yeah.
I because I haven't gone down the chemo path and taken on these other things. I did go through a patch where I actually lost over 20 kilos. So I dropped from about 83 down to 60. And I'm now back up at 80 kilos and recovered to an extent where if people I meet on the street, if I didn't bring the topic up, no one would ever pick that I was still deemed to be stage 4 cancer, so you'd never know.
No.
So
And that's the thing, isn't it? I mean, actually my cardio is very good. He said to me that I'm literally the only one of his hundreds of patients that is doing anything natural. And he grills me, asks me what I'm doing, and I'm like, oh, I've been skiing, cross country skiing this week, and we do a lot of hiking, 15, 17K hikes,
yes.
up hills. And then he's even knows down to the how many my weight was the last appointment. And he asked a lot of questions about it. I know that he
Right.
won't necessarily be able what supplements I'm taking. He doesn't necessarily going to be able to implement a lot of things. But even the last appointment, he was like, oh, you can take some garlic pills as well for high blood pressure, which I thought was a real change. So after the time that I've seen him, I think that the allopathic medicine doctors are actually becoming a little bit more open-minded, because some of the things that they're doing are simply not working under the conditions that we are in now with, I don't know if you've watched like the whole series of the post SARS-CoV-2 world, with prions and the various things that are going around now, the inflammatory thrombosis. So
Yep.
it's a different world that they're operating in as well. So they're now having to search for answers that certain treatments that might have given that patient 5 years or 10 years are no longer as effective. And I know myself going through this the second time round, the stuff that I had to do the first time round to recover was so easy compared to this time round that I've actually had to really up the ante a lot to what
Right.
people might consider extreme. Like, for example, 9-day water fasts and
Right. Yeah.
using sauna and nice and detox and very strict diets, like can't deviate, no oils, plant-based, whole foods, nothing processed.
Yes.
And now once you sort of adopt that and you realize it's kind of life and death, you're getting results, you're fine with it. I think that the unknown for a lot of people when they do go to the doctors is a sense of, oh, if I do all of this, what if it doesn't work? But the thing is, when you're facing this kind of dire situation, you've got nothing to lose. You
That's
try
right.
all this and you
That's right.
feel amazing and so good.
Yeah.
And like even at 15%, I was doing like kilometers of walking and I wasn't tired. I was living a fairly normal, active life.
Yeah.
So, I think that's the thing is they don't often ask how you feeling, Rob, and to measure, because what is the measure of a successful treatment is not the blood tests. It's really how you're able to live your actual ordinary life
Yeah.
and what
Yeah.
your expectations of that. And I think where you'll get back to is like have that idea. I want to get back to running, or I want to get back to surfing every day or something like that. If that's
Yeah.
your expectation and you're not meeting then you're not actually at where you want to be. So you got to keep working harder to
Yeah.
get to that particular
Yeah.
point. Of course,
Yeah.
everyone has a different scenario. Some people think, oh well, my normal life is just going to work and coming home. If I'm dissatisfied with that kind of health,
Yep.
and that's enough for them. But doctors don't measure it that way. They just do it by blood tests and other scans,
Yeah.
which also are not necessarily accurate, because they
I,
often just only
yeah.
pick
True.
up things
True.
when things are wrong. Or it could just be like, I had a heart scan probably about a month ago now. Oh, no, actually it was a few weeks ago now. Yeah, it's a few weeks ago. And I was under so much stress. My heart just did not behave for the scan. The technician completely freaked me out. And she was like, oh, wait, I've got to go and see the cardio. And I thought to myself, oh my God, what's happened? But anyway, the cardio was good because, as I said, he's placed a special interest in my file. He's like, oh no, your heart was just doing some weird stuff, but I can see there's been, improvement here. So all good. But, like let's say he was not on top of it. He could potentially have looked at that scan and said, there's something really wrong here, because it's a matter of interpretation of those results. So back to your story. So what did you do? Like, I think you were in your email, you said you did some certain supplements, and you also did Fixo, that I can't say the word. The Fixo.
1 second. Sorry. Um, can you? I'm not sure what your.
Oh yeah. So when you messaged me, you also use some other drug, off the
Yes.
counter drug.
Okay. So one of the first things I stumbled upon was a Facebook group started by a fellow called Joe Tippins over in the US. So he was diagnosed with small cell lung carcinoma, and he in turn stumbled across a compound called fenbendazole.
Yep, that's right.
And
Yep.
fenbendazole it's a deworming tablet that's used and used extensively with animals. We have there is a sort of a something very closely related to that for human use as well. But fenbendazole has been used for so long now by so many humans. It's unbelievable. So the Facebook group gives a lot of a background on fenbendazole. When I joined the group 3 years ago, they had about 30,000 members. They've now got 50,000 members right across the world with people using fenbendazole. And the mechanism of it is quite clever. Yes, it'll get rid of worms. It also gets rid of fungal infection, that sort of stuff. What it does is it stops the uptake of sugar. So it does a number of clever things.
Oh, yes, another pathways.
Yeah, but the other thing it also does, it actually weakens the structure of the actual cancer cells. So with that, if you then introduce some other things like fasting or ice baths or that sort of stuff that shock the system, you basically knock these cells over like 10-pin bowling pins,
Yeah.
once they're already weakened. Now, I hasten to add, I've also read stories whereby if you were to introduce low dose chemo in these cases, which and again, I'm dead against chemo, but they've had quite a bit of success in combining the two. But absolute low dose chemo apparently works well. I haven't.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I mean,
I
I think
haven't.
there's that risk benefit in there. I think there's really no hard and fast rules. Often various practitioners will have their inherent biases, as we all do.
Yes,
I wouldn't touch myself. I wouldn't touch benzodiazole because I'm kind of deadly against drugs. But,
yes,
I would use something more like gum turpentine. And I think we sort of discussed that in
right.
the chat. And the
Yes,
reason why I ended up using gum turpentine, and which is widely promoted by Dr. Jennifer Daniels, is because it not only detoxifies, but it also heals the cell membrane. So it has both the mechanisms there of healing as well as detoxifying, and it removes, because that is the primary mechanism of healing, is being able to detoxify and remove all of the
yeah,
poisons from your body. I don't know if you've heard the theory where cancer is essentially poisoning, and
absolutely.
therefore
Yeah,
it's
yeah,
trying to, the tumors and all that are just trying to capture and
yes,
hold all that poison in, which is kind of when you get one of those biopsies and it breaks through and it kind of spreads all over the
yeah,
body, because, and
yeah,
then you kind of die, right?
yeah,
Um,
exactly. Yeah, yeah, yeah,
which is
yeah,
kind
yeah.
of completely nuts. That
Absolutely. And just on that note, that was one of the first things that they recommended to me also, that the urologist suggested, let's do a biopsy so we know exactly what sort of cancer it is. No,
yes,
we're not doing a biopsy. We don't need to know the nature of the cancer. If it's prostate cancer, it's prostate cancer, right? So
yeah.
there's many ways of treating that. So yeah, but I hear you. I hear you. Yep.
And I
And
think the same thing goes with whether it's parasites or fungus. To me,
yep,
it's like it doesn't matter what it is. I mean, I think there's a lot of obsession with what product, and that's where I guess gum turpentine works so well, because it's across all of those things. So you don't need to know what specific thing that you're actually targeting. And then of course there's hydration, where you kind of are removing all of these things from the body. And
yes,
where I think it's important for people to understand is the actual mechanism of detoxification, so that if things are going quite fast and they're
yep,
getting a lot of Herx reaction, they can just slow it down to,
yep,
to manageable levels, because you don't really want a situation where you're vomiting and like
yeah, yeah,
it's not ideal.
yeah,
It doesn't feel good mentally. It does
yep,
and it's building up a whole lot of inflammation in your body.
yep, yep,
So
that's
you
it.
can do things in a slow, controlled way, slow down the dose. And again, I think when you're looking at, say, low dose chemo or low dose poisons, it's giving your liver that time to recover. Whereas if
Yeah,
you're And I think afterwards, where you can potentially rebuild your strength after whatever treatment, whatever drugs that there are, that I think sometimes we can become a bit black and white, and where I get to this point with people is you've got to make that active decision. What does your body need right now? And of
Yeah.
course, if you're going to do a whole lot of different things and throw in everything, you probably won't need much. And like if you do the sunshine, you're sleeping, you're eating well, you're
Yeah.
exercising, you're water
Yeah.
fasting, you're very mindful of all those things. Then
Yes.
and you throw in some gum turpentine, you're not probably going to need a lot of these extra things. But where I guess people they fall short is they start relying on certain things. Like they'll just take their vitamin D, which is also a poison. I think Dr. Gareth Evans sort of was saying that. And often the doctors don't understand the mechanisms, the pathways. Like you were talking just then about what pathways it's blocking. So for example, with fenbendazole, it blocks the sugar uptake. But an
Yeah.
easier method would be simply don't have any sugar. You know
Right.
what I mean? Like there are alternatives that we can use. Like there's a product, ACE2 inhibitors also store, one of the pathways is it stops the leakage of potassium. So that improves the heart in a way. So, but instead of, you could actually just take potassium, but not obviously too much, because too high potassium is going to cause heart failure. And it's finding that balance of homeostasis, of not going too far, because detoxing has really been promoted within this kind of health space, but people don't realize that detoxing too rapidly and it can cause liver damage, but it can actually kill you, because you want this gradual detox where you're replenishing your body, because every time you detox, you actually need the good stuff to come back in
Yeah.
to
Yes.
fix the stuff.
Yeah.
So you used fenbendazole and how did you find that? Like, what sort of results were you getting? Like, when did you obviously are very in tune with your body, so
Sure.
you felt different, did you?
Yeah. Well, look, it does work. It's not the only solution, I've got to say, but it's part of the armory that I or part of a group of supplements. I've also dabbled with, and I'll come back. I'll circle back around to that, but I'll let you know the other stuff
Yep.
that I've been doing as well. So I did go through a period where I was doing high dose vitamin C intravenously as well.
Yep.
And then also hyperbaric therapy. So, so again, I haven't been able to definitively say that, yes, this works particularly well or that works particularly well, right? I think the fenbendazole is a good stable thing. You've got to be a little bit careful with that because, again, as you point out earlier, there's a slight toxicity factor there as well that you need to be wary of. So I do take up to 2,000 milligrams of fenbendazole a day, so 1,000 in the morning, 1,000 at night, sort of keep that up. It on its own hasn't sort of fixed the problem, but in combination with a range of other things, I think they all contribute for me. So the other thing that I subscribe to is there's a fellow called Professor Seyfried out of the States, and he has a totally different approach, and he's been researching this for years also. So he looks at cancer as a metabolic disease as opposed to a genetic disease. So interestingly, he's sort of taken over where Otto Warburg sort of left off back in the 20s and 30s, and has taken research research steps a lot further. So he says, yes, what happens to cancer cells is they convert from using.
Off you go.
Hi.
I have no pets.
Tessa, go other way.
From converting or being able to work with oxygen to
Yes.
converting into fermenting sugar, right? So he then's basically recommends a ketogenic diet and getting off as many carbs as possible,
Yeah,
right?
because
Uh,
carbs convert to sugar, which feeds
yeah,
cancer. Yeah.
yeah. Now I've been doing that, and as much as that was, I found that a little bit tricky. Well, tricky. It comes back to willpower. I have no problem with saying no to hamburgers, but I do have a problem saying no to croissants and that sort of thing. You know, I so enjoy those. It's wicked, but so I will occasionally have a croissant on a weekend, but generally speaking, I've given up bread. I've given up white rice. I've given up any of those sorts of carb things, even things like rolled oats, which I thoroughly enjoy. But you give away all that, so I largely have a vegetarian diet, and an occasional fish and roll mops, believe it or not, which comes from my German background. The other thing is the cancers feed on two things. So sugar is the big one. The other one that you hear less about is glutamine, and glutamine is in most red meats, but it's also in sauerkraut. It's also in a range of other stuff, but in smaller amounts. So if you can cut out the glutamine and the sugar, they're the big protagonists, right? So roll mops, even though it's got all the right oils in it, but low in glutamine, and you still get a bit of protein. So and you need a little bit of protein, otherwise you end up losing all the muscle mass. You cannot, I find, live on just the vegetarian. I know there are vegetarians out there that do that, but I find it a bit difficult. I think it's better to have a little bit of protein in there. So yeah. So that's sort of what works for me. But you get into the keto zone, and I think that, in combination with all the other supplements that I take, that's been working well. That's been working
Yeah, I
well.
mean, I guess this is the whole theory really with water fasting, is it puts your body in a state of ketosis where
Yep.
your body gets rid of all the dead old cells and
Yep.
recycles it.
Yep.
And you're not, injecting more sugars in that are feeding anything pathogenic in your body, which creates more food, I guess, for the cancer to grow. I mean, I think we sort of have to look beyond cancer as it's almost a symptom of poisoning. So what
Right.
you're essentially doing in your life is reducing the poisons that are coming into your body
Yes.
and trying to remove all of those poisons. And
Yes.
everything just feels better. Like, I found that at the end of 9 days of water fasting, my energy levels were sky high, my
Yep.
thinking was clear. And it's sort of the opposite of what people will think. They'll think, oh, you should be feeling sickly and dying after not eating for 9 days. But your
I
body
know.
kind of reorganizes itself in such
Absolutely.
an
Yeah.
amazing way, because you've removed the trash. And I think that's where it comes down. And people talk about gut health, but they don't really understand it. Like when you were talking about their sauerkraut, like a lot of these groups are also promoting it. Like, I think some things can be good for certain people. This
Yes.
was in one of our last podcasts, whereas it can actually, because it feeds certain gut bacteria that they have, that's
Yes.
causing certain things. And then, of course, for you or some cancer patients, if they're giving the same advice with vinegars and sauerkrauts, it
Yep.
can be potentially fatal.
Right.
That
Look, I've tried I've not tried. I've done the fasting as well, and it works. It works a treat, but you need to be a little bit careful as to where you're at. If you're already at a stage where you've lost a ton of weight,
yes.
you can't do it. So I've done it at times where I've regained my weight and I could afford to lose a few kilos. So I've been through stages where I've been back up over 60. Oh, sorry, over 80 kilos, and waited for that time, and then I've gone on either a 3 or a 9 day fast, and it works particularly well, I've got to say.
Yeah, and I think this is where people have to understand that there's a toolkit you've got. Like, you have to know yourself when the right time to do something
Yes.
is,
Yeah.
because it's not and where I guess it's hard is for, like, what they want is often they want to go to a doctor, and the doctor's not going to know, because you have to feel in your own body what's the right time to do
Yes.
something, or to
Yeah.
take something, or to stop taking something.
Yep.
You know,
Yep. Good
like there
point.
will be a time where you will
Good point.
stop taking fenbendazole. There will just,
Yeah.
there'll no longer be a need
Yeah.
for it.
Yeah.
And to continue to take it, well, defeats the purpose. There's more toxicity going in
Yeah.
than
Yeah.
any
Yeah.
particular benefit coming
Yeah.
out.
Yeah. Look,
So
I'm glad I'm glad you mentioned that, Jeannie. Or brought that part of it up. I have not taken, I have not been religious about, and I say that with all due respect, but I have not been regimented, say, about taking any one particular thing over this 3-year journey.
yes,
So I've taken fenbendazole for a period of time, then I've given it a break, and I've gone back on it. So just to make sure that the liver can cope with all of that, for example, and to see also what would happen, you know.
yeah.
So I mean, I've been
Keep a diary.
experimenting.
Do you keep a diary of your
I
journey?
do, yeah,
Yeah. I
yeah,
think that's
yeah,
really important when people are going through a health journey.
yeah,
I keep a diary of weight,
yes,
various readings,
yes,
and also keep a diary of what I've been eating
yep,
and how I've been feeling and what sort of
yeah, yeah,
milestones I've made.
absolutely,
Because I think sometimes you look back and you go, oh, look, I was climbing mountains at that point, and all of
yeah,
a sudden I wasn't. I also did some sort of experimentation where I did go off heart meds, and I wasn't taking very much, only 2.5 milligrams. But I actually found that it didn't work for me. Like I
right,
needed to go
yep,
back on it.
yep,
Um, that was really quite humble pie.
yeah,
It was really,
right,
but again, it's like you keep a diary, you keep
yep,
going back, and you're assessing how you're feeling. And then I understood, okay, I need to do this to slow my heart down so that it gives it a rest. Therefore, I'm able to rebuild that endothelium. And what I needed to do with that was greens, in particular. Um, and and one thing I actually figured out recently was, like I think you mentioned, you didn't catch a cold, right? And I'm
yeah,
also that certain person in the family that everyone can get sick, and I don't catch anything except for one time when I did catch something and I ended up in heart failure. But I realized that catching a cold and being sick is actually a mechanism of detoxification, and why I need that we were actually essentially building up toxins within us in our bodies, and then it
yep,
manifests as disease. And I've heard this, mentioned in other places where people were saying, okay, this person never got sick, and then they got cancer, or then they got heart disease.
yeah,
And I think, in our past, we can realize that, oh, that's where water fasting, particularly for people like ourselves, is very useful, because then we realize, oh, we're not going to detox like normal people. Our pathways there are not as open. And some people even say, because you're so toxic, you can't afford to detox in having a cold. So I thought that was very interesting too. Richard Fleming actually talks about cancer in the whole spectrum of his unified theory as not having less clotting and more blood flow, and heart disease he describes as having more clotting and less blood flow. So it's sort of like disease itself becomes this kind of spectrum, and therefore we sort of adapt our own lifestyle, or the choices we make in order to recover,
yep,
based on our individual circumstances, because everyone's
yes,
circumstance is particularly different, which is why I think this kind of do-it-yourself medicine is hard. It's good to listen to everyone's stories and
yes,
grab from it where you sit. And I love what you've done, because it's very similar to me. You do certain things for a certain time,
yeah,
and then you stop. And of course, what people do want sometimes is they say, "Can I have the protocol?" Like, what
yeah,
is it? What
yeah,
is
yeah,
it? But even if I could give them the protocol, I can give them the basic overall understanding of what it is, which is what we try and do with these particular podcasts. In
yeah,
that, in
good point.
searching for that information, people will find the things that they need to do, and they're often not just one thing.
Right, absolutely correct. Yeah, I couldn't agree more. But the and, and I'll bring this back to the what I was saying earlier. If you hand that responsibility over to an oncologist or to any other sort of medical professional, you're allowing them to then control what it is that what you do and don't do. If you take that responsibility on yourself, there's a lot more effort involved, but it's your responsibility. And really it comes back to, in my opinion, the more you take on that responsibility and delve down into those things, you will work out what it is that works for you. Without needing to be a medical professional. There's so much information available out there now, Google, ChatGPT, whatever, right? We've got all that information at our fingertips, and even YouTube. I first stumbled across Professor Seifert on YouTube, right? So it's a lot easier than what it was, but you need to take on the responsibility yourself, and you will work it out. This is the thing.
Yeah, I think what's interesting is after you go through this journey and you've been there for a few years now, you think to yourself, why didn't I just do that at the start? Like, why didn't I understand it all? That often it's a growth thing that you get to a certain point and you go, and it's often a lot easier in the holistic point of view, like than you think. You know, it's very basic, you know, essentially sunshine, sleep, nutrition, hydration, proper balance,
grounding,
you know, all of those things, attitude, emotional balance, de-stressing, especially stress, all of those things combined together. That sometimes if you get one of those things out, like say for example, stress, you can do all the right things, you can eat and everything, and then if you get stressed out, you can't heal. You can't heal. And I think that's where, you know, with you've decided, you know, your balance is, okay, I need that croissant every weekend. That's your balance. At some point, if it didn't work and, you know, you were more sick, well, you probably have to throw out the croissant, right? But we all need to, there's no hard and fast rules as to what our balance is, you know, because we're making that decision. We're taking that responsibility on. Whereas I think people are looking sometimes for an answer outside of themselves rather than the answer within themselves.
Very good point. Very good point. Let me throw this in. Because of the so-called success that I'm having, I get lots of friends that recommend that pass on other people that have been struck down with cancer, and so Rob, would you mind having a talk to this person, which I do with absolutely gladly, but I can tell within the first 5 minutes of the conversation whether these people are going to make it long or medium term or not. And the big thing is, so many people have a poor me attitude, right? And they say, well, shit, why me? Which is natural. That's fine. That's one of the first things. But then if you wallow in just that, it ain't going to take you anywhere, right? You really need to get beyond that feeling and say, well, you know what? Let's see this as an opportunity for me to take control and fix myself. That's the thing that's going to get you and help prolong your life. Whereas you're going to sit there and wallow in the, oh shit, I've got cancer. That's it. I'm giving up. Those people will only last a very short period of time. And they're the ones generally that say, well, they said, the men in white coats, that I've got to do chemo and I've got to do this, whatever it is. That doesn't work.
I totally agree. I used to, when I work with women who had postpartum cardiomyopathy, and it doesn't matter, like, so a normal heart function is 55% to 65%, and low normal is 50%. So a woman could come in and be diagnosed at 40%, or sometimes women can come in diagnosed at literally as low as 6%, 5% heart function. It's very low. So, you know, 15% thereabouts going lower, you know, it's sort of like down to really critical levels. But what I found is that women who at 40% who didn't have that attitude, with a few years down the track, dead, literally. Whereas women at, you know, 6%, it didn't matter how low they started or how critical their journey was, they're fully recovered and living a normal life. And this is really the most important. People can take it away from what we're saying here today is mindset and what you're actually consuming. I think what happens, you can get into the whole, reading medical studies stuff. You can just, you can go blind looking at all of that. And it's a lot of it's fear-based, a lot of it's negative. It takes, usually for me, if I see a doctor, I usually just get the echo done to see where my heart is at, and have a chat with him. But even though I've got a great cardio, and we've got a good working relationship, and he respects my beliefs and what I'm doing and gives me that space,
Yep.
without any threats, without any coercion or emotional blackmail, it still takes me a week to recover, like every time, emotionally, and just the heart space. And so therefore, if you're going to continually put yourself in that position online by the material that you're reading, and you're not going to go to support groups where people are positive, then you're going to actually drag yourself down, and I think another big factor in it is who you surround yourself with. Like when you're actually really sick, you don't want to be exposed to toxic people in your life. It's just that extra
Yeah.
thing
Extra little bit of burden that you don't need.
that you don't need. Yeah. And is that what you found as well? Like in your journey, that you sound like your partner's amazing, that she's there, confronting and that's another thing that people should file away, or as much as possible, try and go to medical appointments with somebody else to have that additional support. They're less likely to bully you, and you've also got someone to feedback from as to how that actual meeting went down.
Yeah. Just with regard to my partner, we met 2 weeks before my diagnosis.
Wow.
And I said to her when I got the results, I said, listen, we've only just met, and I'm loving this, but here's what I've just learned, and I want you to know you're free, and I totally get if you don't want to take part in this and walk away from it before it gets any more serious. And she actually turned around and said, you know what, I'm actually enjoying this as well. She said, she said, what do you think? I said, look, at the very least, it's going to be a roller coaster. I said, I don't know where it's coming from, but I feel I'm going to get through this. But it'll be a roller coaster, and there's no obligation on your part to sort of take part in my roller coaster. And she actually turned around and said, you know what? No, I'm in.
Amazing.
And
so she just came into your life just at the right time, really, in a way.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And believe it or not, it's our 3-year anniversary today.
Oh, wow. So
There you go.
when you go back to the oncologist, what are they saying to you now with the?
Well, the first one I haven't gone back to, but the second one, and she's actually, again, I won't name where she's at, but she's a professor as well, and she's at one of the major teaching hospitals here in Sydney. And she and I locked horns very early on in the piece. And when I was, but to be fair, I have much to thank her for, and at a time when I had lost 60 kilos, she made sure that I got those things that I did agree with, and in many regards, I've got her to thank that I'm still here, because when back about 2 years ago, I came down with pneumonia as well. This is sort of was it sort of COVID? It was it was either just before or just after COVID. Anyway, I had lost 23 kilos and got pneumonia as well. When I was in hospital, and I did not look good, I've got to say. I was a sorry sight. But at that time, I was in hospital for 9 days, And 7 of those days, I got a visit from the oncology department saying, you need to do chemo. You need
Oh,
to do
really?
chemo. No. I said, look, I know things don't look good, but I'm not doing chemo. I said, if I do chemo, and like logic said to me at the time, and I said to him, look, you know what? If I were 20 years younger and carry another 25 kilos, I would possibly consider it. Probably still no, but possibly consider it. I said, but the state I'm in now, I said, chemo is the last thing that will kill me.
Yes.
And in the end, they pulled back from that, and I've been seeing her ever since then on a every 6 months just to monitor things. And there's no more push for chemo. She makes a note of all the other stuff that I do and take. And I've got to say, I went to see her last week for the regular checkup. And when I walked into her room, she actually looked up at me and she shook her head. She said, you know, Rob, I'm actually amazed at how well you look. Hey, something's working. So thank you. Yeah.
Also, they're quite happy with your progress and everything. They're not, I guess, look, we sort of expect them to sort of take us as some sort of case study and put us, on a on their and frame us on their wall. But of course, we kind of break that paradigm of what they're doing, so we become the exception to the
Right.
rule, and you'll
Right.
be this exception. But I'll take that. Exception and a life. Who can go past all of that. So do you
Yeah.
do exercise as well as part of your kind of healing routine?
I do, probably not as much as I should, but a little trick that I'll throw in, which is recommended by another. There's a couple of leading lights. I don't mind mentioning this fellow's name, Dr. Gary Mason, who's up here in Sydney. He does a podcast as well. Very, very clever guy. He specialises in sports medicine, but he's so well read and so good at all these other areas. And the two things I learned from him a couple of months ago. One is, look, do 2 lots of high intensity interval. Sorry, HIIT training, high intensity interval training,
Yes.
right? He said not for long. He said just maybe five, no more than 10 minutes twice a day on a bike, get that heart rate up. And he said, he said to me, what do you think that's for? I said, oh, blood circulating, oxygen. He said, yes. He said, but the thing that people forget is you're putting extra stress on those cancer cells. So it'll actually knock out cancer cells as well.
Mm.
Oh, it's true. Those little tweak things. And the other trick I learned from him, he says, and he pointed me in the right direction as to where to get these. Get a glucose monitor. And there's a new style of glucose monitor now that you can put a patch on your arm. You don't have to put your finger every time, just to sort of monitor your sugar intake. So you can actually tell whether this is actually spiking your blood sugar or not. Again, so simple, and makes a
Yeah.
lot of sense, just funny little things like that. So yeah. But I would recommend anyone to check out Gary Mason on YouTube. He's brilliant, and he's so many of these people. We here in Australia are generally a little bit skeptical and cynical of many others out there in other parts of the world because we know better. But because Gary Mason's homegrown, like you warm to him immediately. He's a good man. He's a good man.
Yeah. And I do think they are becoming much more open like that. So
Yeah.
so what do you think caused you to get quite sick in the first place? Do you think it was the cancer that got you down with pneumonia? Were you becoming quite toxic and that's why you got sick with pneumonia, lost so much weight? And then after that, you had some interventions
Yeah.
in hospital to obviously get
But
over, and then you put the weight back on.
yeah, I basically it was a whole lot of antibiotics, and that then saw me through, got me over the pneumonia, and once I was released from there, I then got back. I was very conscious then about what I was eating, etc. But it was from there on I started putting weight on again. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think sometimes, isn't it, like there's that health crisis that you get to this certain point where you go, got to take this really seriously now. I mean, I
Yeah.
know, like
True.
I think a lot of people
True.
do think that once you get the diagnosis, unless you kind of feel sick, and this sort of happened to me,
Yeah.
where I got the diagnosis, I was, I could still live quite a normal life, and you
Yep.
get slack, and you
Yes.
don't pay
Yeah.
that attention. We're human, right?
So- Same here. Absolutely.
You
Yeah.
take that connection. Then I think it was like November last year, I went downhill again, and I was faced with my results. And I was like, okay, I know what to do. I'm just going to buckle down and throw everything at it and do it. And of
Yeah.
course, within 3 months, I was back up again. And
Yeah.
sometimes that plays on me a little bit because I know that if I drop down again, that I can do that. I
Yeah.
can hit it hard and get back on. But I know that what happens is you really have to get to a certain level where you don't have to worry about it anymore. You don't have to worry about
Yeah.
monitoring your blood sugars, or you
Yeah.
can eat a bit more out and you're not so concerned because it's that margin of error, if you'd say. Like, I think when you're chronically ill, your margin for error is much smaller. And this is where I think with some of the things that are being proposed out there, it becomes a little bit dangerous because the margin for error, if you're very chronically ill and you're taking certain supplements and certain things, you have to really assess whether those things are worth it. The risk is worth the benefit is worth the risk, because they can tip you over the edge to end up with liver failure
Yeah.
and,
Yeah.
death ultimately, which is game over.
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
Yeah.
that anything before game over, I think you can definitely recover from. And of course, you can do some serious organ damage by long-term use of
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
substances.
Yeah.
Oxygen therapy is a very interesting one. It's been quite successful. It is, I think, one of the things that we don't think about often. Like, that's because it's free breath work, you
Yep.
know, and because oxygen is that apoptosis, where it does get rid of oxidization, gets rid of dead cells in our body.
Yes.
And, we end up with, when we have low oxygen, that's when cancer, can run riot, and even heart disease.
Yes.
We have, with exercise, it also increases nitrogen oxide in the blood, which is essential for so many different
Yep.
things. And you realize your body is this incredible machine. And
Yep.
once it goes off,
Yep.
um, that's when things go. And the wonderful thing is it's such an adaptive machine, and perhaps that's why we can take it for granted in
Right.
a lot of ways, because we know that we have a comeback in some ways. I know,
Yep.
like, we're both feeling quite good now, so this is the dangerous part.
Yeah.
When you are feeling quite good is when you can actually lose that focus. Like, I
Yeah.
think it's easier.
That's true. And look, I think that's a human nature thing. This is it. But let me just hold that thought if you might. I'd like to add something to the oxygen therapy and hyperbaric. Um, Again, a really interesting situation there. I'd actually flagged that with my current oncologist. He said, "Oh, you can't do that. It causes oxidization and it's bad for you." And I ran that past the woman who ran the center that I was doing this therapy at the time, and she said a really, really good point. And she was actually an expert in this area. She'd just come back from a big conference over in the States. So the emphasis is on the fact that it's almost a low dose,
Yeah.
right? So it's not at the high doses that they have in hospitals that they sometimes treat other things at. So what a lot of these specialists point to is studies that focus on the really high pressure hyperbaric therapy.
Mm.
And yes, that causes oxidization and that will exacerbate cancers, right? But the low dose that you get in most of the places in
Mild ones, yeah.
Melbourne, yeah,
Mm.
it's a mild version thereof.
I
It's
don't think anyone has the high dose outside the hospital system. From one of my research, they were marketing the mild hyperbaric
like,
chambers, which again is what we're sort of talking about in terms of safety. That it gives you that shift without going overboard with it. It gives your body that chance to recover.
Right. Right. So what, just to put it into technical terms, it's what they're allowed to do for salons, etc., or health studios without sort of medical certification. They can go up to 1.3 atmospheres.
Yeah.
So, and that's considered low dose, whereas in the hospitals they go beyond that, and it's the levels beyond that that cause the oxidation often, but can fix some things, and certainly, you know, when you have the bends and that sort of stuff, they have the higher concentrations, but anything up to 1.3, I'm told is very, very safe and does not exacerbate oxidation within the body, for example. Yeah.
And another thing people can do if they don't want to do that, as another hack, I guess, is to go up and high into the mountains, and your body will naturally, because of the low oxygen, will actually produce more red blood cells, and you'll
Okay.
come back down quite energized. So, and of course, you
Right.
can combine that with hiking. So there's all these, I guess, natural things or hacks, if you
Yes.
like, that
Yes.
like grounding, walking at the beach, taking in all those negative ions that help the body to detoxify, to heal, to find that emotional, physical balance again. I think often they do say, though, that cancer can be related to sort of emotional issues as well, you know, releasing emotional
Well, look,
pain and trauma.
that's another really interesting point. I totally agree with that. I think I developed my problem after I'd gone through a sort of a double barrel thing. I went through a very acrimonious divorce, and simultaneously I went through a 3-year commercial litigation issue. And I used to wake up at these two were happening simultaneously. I used to wake up at 3:30 in the morning with this amazing knot in my stomach. Like during the day, you'd never think there was anything wrong, right? I'm sort of put on a brave face, and I thought I was coping well with it, but it was the waking up at 3:30 in the morning. It was obviously stirring something inside, and it was after that was all over, and I could sort of, there was a sigh of relief almost. Then bang, I struck down with, well,
Yeah.
I got the diagnosis. It's almost that the body was sort of
Like your
relaxed.
body was able to do that adrenaline and keep it going for similar to me, you know, you're fine when the adrenaline's all pumping, and then all of a
Yep,
sudden life
yep,
normalizes, I guess, or stops or becomes more stable. And all of a
yes,
sudden you end up with this diagnosis and you think,
yes,
oh, where did that come from?
exactly,
Because the
exactly.
adrenaline was essentially keeping it all at bay
Yeah,
in a way, like it was keeping you in that sort of heightened state. And then once, I think in some ways it gives you that opportunity to heal because your life sort of slows down and you
yeah,
kind of have to reassess and think about it, which is how I think if people, when they're coming to someone like us, should sort of look at their story. When I've actually interviewed Pia Nock about circadian rhythm and light, and if people go back and watch that video, it's very interesting. We talk about like the whole, she talks about finding your story, right? So even at the start of this, it's like you had a story. You were already seeing your story as one where you're going to overcome and heal. And even for myself too, I thought when I got that 15% diagnosis, I thought, okay, this is my story. I'm going to recover and I'm going to help other people heal.
yeah,
And if people at the start of that journey of being diagnosed or having any sort of health issue can kind of see that story, the end of it, I think that's such a powerful vision in a
yeah,
sense, because it's like anything, starting a business, starting an education, a program, a course, you have to see the end of it. Like even having a baby, you know, you have to see the end result. And
yes,
then you navigate through those difficult moments, you know, because there are difficult times throughout that whole
yeah,
process that,
yes,
you know, we just want to hide and no one really understands what you're going through. And because on the outside, generally, you know, you look okay.
yeah,
And then
yeah,
you have your high days and your low days. But when you can hold on to that vision,
yeah,
then you get through to the other side.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And the support network. So have you had lots of support? So you've got your partner and around you. That I think that's also another important aspect of healing
Yeah,
is finding
yeah,
a support network.
yeah, absolutely true. Now, here's an interesting point. Again, the same oncologist that that was all against the hyperbaric therapy because it was going to cause more harm than good, was also of the same belief and pointed to studies that said that cancer, that there was no emotional connection at all.
Oh, really?
I said, really? Really?
Yeah.
There's it, but it fit, that thinking fits again into that paradigm. So I get it. It shouldn't have surprised me, but it did.
Yeah, they don't want to see you as a whole person in it. And I
Yeah,
think people have to start seeing themselves as a whole person, because once you enter the medical system or enter sort of even, I find even the holistic system, sometimes people forget that you are this whole person with
yeah,
multiple
yeah, yeah, yeah,
dimensions
yeah, yeah,
and a life outside your diagnosis. There
yeah,
is
yeah,
someone else behind all of that. And
yeah,
there's a
yeah, yeah.
story behind all that. And is that
Oh,
why you've sort of been inspired to start a podcast called, you're going to start a podcast, I said, Food for Thought, where you're
that's right.
interviewing
Yeah.
leaders of alternative health solutions,
Yep.
cutting edge science, because you want to bring all these ideas and people together. As
Yes.
it's sort of like a virtual community, essentially.
Yeah. Yeah. I think more of this information needs to get out there, and it needs to be more freely available. And again, the problem is now that there's only so much you can say. So before they start shutting you down, so you need to, you need to be careful at the outset. But there are other ways of getting out there. But putting that aside, generally speaking, I want to get that news out there. Like Professor Seifert over in the States and his metabolic approach is just fantastic, and it will treat a range of cancers, and his solution is pretty much universal for cancers, full stop, right? But more of that later. But there's so many other things in anything medical and health and well-being related that is like that, that so much of the stuff doesn't get to see the light of day. And I think and I mean, the word that you're spreading, for example, is fantastic. It's we just need to do more of this, I think.
Yeah, and to approach it from different angles, I think from my understanding of all the doctors and all the alternative health practitioners that I've spoken to, there's a lot of overlap and understanding with it all. And of course, everyone's going to sort of assimilate that information kind of differently.
Yep.
Where I'm at today with what I believe is where I'm at today will probably may not be where I'm going to be in a year's time. And I think it's
Yeah.
similar for you.
Yep.
It's like it's almost like this evolving story based on who you talk to and how
Yep.
you assimilate that information into your own framework of
Yep.
understanding right now,
Yeah. No,
which is where I
absolutely.
encourage others right now to go and watch some of the old videos that we've done from Health Alliance Australia with various doctors there, Dr. Fleming, Dr. McCann, we've got Karen, um, yes, Karen Johnson, Dr. Joe Lee, Dr. Gareth Smith. They've all got their various angles of it
Yes.
because they've all got
Yep.
their own specialties, but you'll actually find there's a lot of overlap and there's also this kind of gems within it. It's kind of like you're digging for gold, and it is, I guess some people say, oh, it's too hard, but it's actually how we got into this situation often is because we weren't actively looking after our bodies. Like it's a fine-tuned car, right? We probably look after our cars and our properties more than we look after our bodies and understand them more. So
Mm.
this is only one body that we have. And
Yeah.
in order we've not been given a manual for it. And in
No.
fact,
Right.
the education that we've been given when we were growing up was very, very limited. Like even the whole idea of calories and, carbs, it's all very, very basic and
Yeah.
not very helpful.
No.
So in a way, often when you do get faced with health crisis, it's probably the worst time to do it but you're sort of faced in a situation where you actually have to understand how your body works and then apply that knowledge by testing it out, which is, I guess, what you've done here. You've tested various things out
Yeah.
and come to an understanding. So to sum up, what would you think how do you think, what model would you use in terms of your own healing? Are you thinking that you had what the cause was stress, emotional imbalance that caused like
Yeah.
parasite overgrowth?
Yep. Look, stress. There's no question that stress is a huge factor. And then I think, look, in my particular case, because I'd led a fairly healthy life and never really had any major health concerns, and there's no doubt that there's your body copes with stuff, right? But I think there's obviously stuff lurking in the system that was then triggered by this unrelenting stress over a 3-year period. I think that's what caused it in my particular case, right? So you may have been some underlying fungal infections. There may have been some other pathogens hiding, and there could have been some viruses hiding within cells that your body can normally cope with.
Yeah.
But the 3 years of unrelenting stress, bang, all of a sudden it then just triggers things off from there. So I think that's what's happened in my case. Let me see. I've now look. There are a couple of things that I think work particularly well. I'm still fine tuning a couple of those. The fenbendazole, I think, is a great help. Again, if anyone were to go to the website, it's full of it's called My Cancer Story Rocks, is the Facebook site. It's full of success stories with all types of different cancers. So it's not just for one particular one. There's a broad spectrum of great positive results there. But look, I'm very comfortable and very confident that Professor Seyfried's approach has got a lot of merit. And I came across him very early on in the piece, and I didn't take it as I sort of took that information and parked it. I didn't really follow it as so strictly, but I am following it strictly now. And I'll come back to you and let you know how that goes. But I think that's working particularly well.
And you're using a mostly plant-based vegetarian diet.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. And predominantly keto.
Yeah.
So with that, you can predominantly keto. So you can add in meat, you can add in eggs, that sort of thing. But I restrict that part because the meat is full of glutamine. So and I want to keep that to a bit of a minimum. But generally speaking, for other cancers that are not hormone driven, that will work particularly well. But look, it'll work particularly well across the board. You need to just fine tune it for your particular circumstance. Yeah. The other thing, there's a bit of humor in this, and humor is something that is often difficult to sort of keep up when you're confronted with the fact that you may not live for much longer, or if you're racked with pain for whatever, right? But the medical profession are really good at working out percentages, right? So you've got a 3% chance of surviving this, right? So most people think, oh shit, 97% probability of carking it. Who's to say you're not part of that 3%, right?
Yeah.
Now the reason that the bit of humor is that is covered really well. I actually did a post on this a few months ago. There's a scene out of Dumb and Dumber where the main character, name escaped me for a moment, he falls in love with this girl, and he goes to see her and says, what are the chances of you and I hitting it off, right? And she says, not good. And he says, not good as in 1 in 100? She says, no, not good as in 1 in a million. Right? And the scene stops, and all of a sudden the smile comes up on his face, and he says, so there's still a chance. a good way to finish off. So I think as funny and corny as that might be, and the scene itself is if you're a Dumb and Dumber fan, Dumb and Dumber fan, it's a classic scene. But it's important to not lose sight of the fact that you're always in there with a chance.
That's right.
As soon as you let go of that and say, "Oh, I'm rooted," it's all over. Huh?
Yeah, and I think that's where, we did a lot of podcasts at the start, establishing SARS-CoV-2, the bioweapons, and we did the podcast with Kevin McCann that was particularly dark on prions. And
Right.
people were sort of commenting like, what do we do now? And so where we've kind of come full circle is like, okay, now we're bringing the stories on how people can heal and bringing hope. And
Yep.
because
Yep.
that's the most important thing out of all of this. Like, we've established the harm of what has been done, and that's really up to the people that are pursuing it and ourselves to bring to justice eventually. But at the same time, you've got everyday people with lives and their own families that need to be helped, and where this story is so important, and why we brought you on even before you can put the piece of paper out there and say I'm fully recovered, because I mean, I'm sure that you will be, but by the time that happens, it won't help other people, as many people as it is going to help today by putting our stories out there now.
Yeah.
Because I think even by seeing us, there is that hope there that
Yeah.
where you can heal, and you are that 1 in a million to believe that. And
Yeah.
once people
Yeah.
can see that, then, because the underlying message, I think, within, say, even alternative health and the mainstream media is one of negativity, simply because negativity and fear actually drives papers. It drives the algorithm.
Yeah.
It's a sick world, but that's the truth. Unfortunately, people generally don't want to listen to good news. They're sort of gravitated. I think it's the way the brain is wired because of survival instincts. They gravitated towards bad news. But when you have a good news story and the positive news story, that's when the life changing. If you can really
Yeah.
dive into that, if you can really kind of take on board that energy, that's when your life can completely transform, not
Yeah.
just on a health wise level, but completely overall, as you've demonstrated yourself, like on a relationship level, business level,
Yep.
every metric, your
Yep.
life improves by
Yep.
who you surround yourself with and the information that you
Yep.
not just absorb, but actually apply. So in closing, did you have
Yep.
anything else to add, Robin?
Look, something that's just dawned on me that I should have mentioned earlier on in the piece is one of the challenges also is it's not only yourself and the practitioners you're dealing with. Quite often, and in my particular case, but I've seen it elsewhere. My own daughter and my former wife, and she and I are good friends again. I've got to say, but both were leaning towards chemo, right? And so there's an awful lot of pressure out there from all those other people around you. Say, oh, go do chemo. You've got to do chemo. These people know what they're talking about. This is part of the problem. So it's not only that are you battling again if you decide not to go down that path, or if you go down any alternate path, we are also brainwashed that the men in white coats and women in white coats know what they're talking about. That it's really difficult to go up against that. So
Yeah.
you need to be strong in your conviction about what it is that you want to do. And look, there's again, I've taken on a couple of these things, but not chemo, and they help. But I've got to say that the stats around chemo are not good. If anyone were to delve deeply into the survival rate, remembering that anything up to 5 years, they'd consider it a success. my answer to that is it takes about 5 years for chemo to kill you. Keep that in mind. Chemo is not the answer. It's a solution that was developed about 50, let's call it 50 years ago, and the survival or the success rate of chemo has not changed in that time. So chemo is not the answer.
And look, you've lived a very healthy life in the last 3 years. I mean, you've lived, apart from that bout of being sick with pneumonia, you've been able to live a normal life, which is bonus, right? And like if you went down the chemo road, that would not be the journey that you could.
That's correct. Absolutely. No. That and again, certainly, if I had have taken it back then, it would have killed me. But even now, no.
Yeah. So in closing, Health Alliance Australia opposes harmful health measures, laws and mandates and provides educational content that is meant to be distributed. Our website, healthallianceaustralia.org, has more about us. Please join, support our work, including our mailing list. But please remember to subscribe, comment, share, distribute this information widely. You never know who it can help. Email or message this to your friends and family. So thanks everyone for watching. Thank you, Robin, for your time today. We'll have all your posts, your links in the description and in our website. You can also find Health Alliance Australia, Robin and myself on LinkedIn. Thanks, everyone.
Okay. Thank you. Cheers now.